Chapter 16, How to Measure Success with Boundaries. Jean sat at her kitchen table, teacup in hand, amazed it was an unfamiliar sensation, but a pleasant one. Her mind wandered back to the events of the morning. Her 8-year-old son, Brian, had begun the day with his usual waking up shenanigans. He sulked and pouted his way to the breakfast table, announcing, "I'm not going to school, and no one's going to make me." Normally, Jean would have either tried to talk Brian into attending school or blown up at him in frustration. However, this morning was different. Jean simply said, "You're right, honey. No one can make you go to school. That has to be something you choose to do. However, if you don't choose to go to school, you are choosing to stay in your room all day with no TV and no video games. But that's something you'll have to decide for yourself, like you did last week." Brian hesitated in his tantrum. He was thinking about when Mom had made him stay in his room and miss dinner when he had refused to set the table. Finally, he said, "Well, I'll go, but I don't have to like it." "Absolutely," Jean agreed. "You don't have to like a lot of things, like school. But I'm sure you've made the right choice." She helped Brian on with his jacket and watched him walk to the carpool ride outside. Not 10 minutes later, Jean had received a call from her husband. Aaron had driven to work early. "Honey," he said, "I just found out I have a meeting after work. The last time I showed up late for dinner, there wasn't any. Think you could save some this time?" Jean laughed. "Last time you never called me to let me know. I really appreciate your telling me in advance. I'll feed the kids, and you and I'll eat together later. My son makes it to school, even with a cranky attitude. My husband calls me to inform me about schedule changes. I'm dreaming, aren't I, Lord?" Jean wasn't dreaming. She was, for the first time in her life, experiencing the reward of setting and maintaining clear boundaries in her life. A great deal of hard work and risk taking had gone into them, but it was worth it. She rose up from the table and began to ready herself for work. Jean saw visible, demonstrable proof that her boundary work was bearing fruit in her life. Things were different. But how did she get from point A, boundarylessness, to point B, mature boundaries? Can we measure our boundary development? Yes. Specific orderly changes herald the emerging of mature boundaries. It's helpful to be aware of them. The following 11 steps allow you to measure your growth, to see where you are in your development. Use this chapter as a guide to the next step in your growth. Step 1, Resentment. Our early warning signal. Randy had never before felt irritated at his best friend. Will's sarcastic digs, resentment was a new sensation for him. Being the butt of the jokes had always been easy for him. Good natured Randy could roll with the punches. But when Will came up to him at church and said in front of several observers, "Are you buying smaller clothes or putting on weight?" Randy didn't laugh it off. He said nothing to his friend, but the remark stuck inside him. He was embarrassed and hurt. He couldn't shake it off as he had so many years, as he had for so many years. This never got to me before, Randy thought to himself. Why is it getting to me this time? Maybe I'm getting too sensitive. One of the first signs that you're beginning to develop boundaries is a sense of resentment, frustration, or anger at the subtle and not so subtle violations in your life. Just as radar signals the approach of a foreign missile, your anger can alert you to boundary violations in your life. Randy had come from a family that avoid, largely avoided conflict and disagreement. Arguments were replaced by compliance. When Randy was in his 30s, he sought therapy for a long standing eating disorder. To his surprise, instead of discussing diet and exercise plans, the therapist had asked him about how he reacted to controlling people in his life. At first, Randy couldn't think of a controlling person, but after some consideration, he thought of Will. Will teasing Randy. Will humiliating Randy in front of his friends. Will taking Randy for granted. Will taking advantage of Randy. Those memories were not simply intellectual pictures in Randy's mind. They carried hurt, anger, and resentment. They were the seed of boundaries in Randy's life. People who can't get angry when they are being violated, manipulated, or controlled have a genuine handicap. No warning light alerts them to boundary problems. This light, when functioning properly, should turn on quickly when you are being attacked. The Bible often describes anger in terms of heat. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Exodus 4, verse 14. Therefore, the Lord's anger burned against this land. Deuteronomy 29, verse 27. Anger is like a fire that shoots up within your heart, letting you know there's a problem to confront. An inability to get angry is generally a sign that we are afraid of the separateness that comes with telling the truth. We fear that saying the truth about our unhappiness with someone will damage the relationship. But when we acknowledge that truth is always our friend, we often give ourselves permission to be angry. So before you say anything confrontative, even before you set that first boundary, examine your heart and ask yourself, do I have permission to feel angry when I'm controlled by others? Am I aware when I'm being violated? Can I hear my early warning signal? If so, you're on the right track. If not, this is a good time to work on finding a safe place to tell the truth. As you are better able to be honest about differences and disagreements, you will be better able to allow your anger to help you.